Okay, so I'm gonna continue with chapter 15. The video ended right here around Protista. So we covered prokaryotes that covered bacteria and archaea, and during that video I made the chart. So we're gonna continue with this chart. Today we're going to focus on Protista. Anything that doesn't fit in animals, fungi, or plants is Protista. And this is domain eukarya. So I drew that here. So under eukarya, we have Protista, fungi, plants, and animals. Plants is its own chapter, animals is its own chapter. These could be its own chapters, but they didn't do that. They just combined it in one chapter. So we're going to cover Protista first, and then we're going to cover fungi today. So Protista, they're very, very, very diverse. It includes algae. This is very generalized term. If you guys remember, I called cyanobacteria algae as well. So that algae includes bacteria and Protista. Slime molds. This looks like fungus, but it's not fungus. And this looks like green like bacteria, but it's not bacteria, it's algae. There are some that come under Protista. And then protozoa. This here is a paramecium. It's a type of organism that behaves like an animal. It's not an animal, but it behaves like an animal. All these types, these three types of organisms, they don't fit into plants or animals or fungus. So we call them Protista. Now, Protista, in this group, you might say they'll all look different. So it's very diverse. They all look different. But when you look at the DNA sequences of these, they're very closely related. So we put them under Protista. So this is what we're going to go over first today. And then we'll go over fungi after Protista. Anybody remembers what proto means? Proto?
One.
So proto means first or before.
Oh.
So I'm gonna say before, and then zoa means animal. So this organism here, which is a paramecium, behaves like an animal, but it's not animal. So we call it protozoa. It's before animals came around. So if you look, at the ocean, it looks green, and that green color is coming from algae. In places like Hawaii or Gulf of Mexico, water is really, really clear. That's because there aren't enough nutrients for algae to grow. Algae makes the water look green. So they're photosynthetic. So first group we're discussing of Protista is photosynthetic Protista. So that's algae. This is going to include, these might be some new names for you, dinoflagellates, diatoms, brown algae, red algae, and green algae. So those are the common types. I'm gonna go over each one of these. So for first group, for Protista, we're talking about algae, mainly the ones that do photosynthesis. So the ones that are photosynthetic. In this algae, we have red algae, green algae. I don't have enough space, so I'm just gonna try to write down here. Another one we have is dinoflagellates. They have flagella. Another one we have is diatoms. And then one more is brown algae. So that's what comes under Protista. That's very diverse. So we're gonna go over all those. Wish I had more space. I should have started another page. Okay. Anybody knows what flagellates means or flagella? Anybody knows what flagella stands for?
Or tiny tendrils, like small, small
What did
fibers.
you say, Jacqueline?
I'm like small fibers.
Small
Kind of like
fibers. Sperm has a flagella, so in biology we call it flagella if it has a tail. So these dinoflagellates, they have two flagella, and they often produce toxins. So the dinoflagellates, they during the day they swim up to the surface. This flagella helps them swimming, and at night they go back, maybe deep in the water. So they have flagella. Di means two, so they have two flagella, and we call them dinoflagellates. So that's first group. I kind of want to make another table for you guys. So let me make another table. So we are covering Protista. And under Protista, first group we have is LJ. And under LJ, we have dinoflagellates. And this has two flagella. That's where the name comes from, di means two. So that's the first one. Another one we have is diatoms. Diatoms have silica. So if it was maybe clamshell, it's made up of calcium. Diatoms, they are single cell organisms and they have silica in their cell wall. Silica is the same thing that glass is made out of. So it's you will find it in moist habitats. So diatoms, they have cell walls made out of silica. Need to close this. So that's the next one we have, diatoms. Have you guys heard about White Cliffs of Dover? So the main characteristic here is silica. Actually, this also goes under LJ, under Protista. So that's another group. It's talking about White Cliffs of Dover. Have you guys heard about it, or anybody been there?
Dover, Delaware, or Dover, England?
Dover, England.
Yes.
Yes, you've seen these in person?
I've not seen them, but I've drove across the channel from there.
Okay, so this is found where the English Channel is between England and France. You see all this white stuff here, that's diatoms. So there was some uplifting and now you see this white stuff, that's diatoms. And if you search White Cliffs of Dover, another thing that comes up is chalk. So it's the same thing. Chalk is made out of this. So we don't really use chalk anymore, but if you maybe go to a pet store, you'll find something called diatomish earth. So if you have ants in some place where you don't want them to be, you can just, so if you were to mine those White Cliffs of Dover, you can get this powder. And if you have ants, you can just sprinkle this powder, and this powder has really, really tiny sharp things in it. If you put it under the microscope, you'll be able to see that. And those sharp things chew up the legs of the insects. So you can just sprinkle this and, it's going to kill all the insects. And that's because I already said this, silica is the same thing the glass is made out of. So let me try to show you France. So those White Cliffs of Dover, those are found in this area. So I don't know if you heard about Julius Caesar, wrote about it. So here, that's Dover. So that's found between Calais and Dover. So that's where you'll be able to see those diatoms if you ever go. So that's diatoms, and they are single cell organisms. Protista includes both single cell and multicellular organisms. Next we have is brown algae. Can somebody tell me, these look like plants. Can somebody tell me why they're not plants? Maybe think about some of the characteristics plants have. No? Okay, so plants, they have roots. Those roots take up water from soil, but these are already in water, so they don't need roots. So they don't have roots. Another thing plants have is stem. The water travels up the stem and that's how it gets up. But because this whole thing is in water, it doesn't have stems either. So these are brown algae. These are kelp and seaweed. They're the largest type. If you go to the beach, you'll be able to see these. They don't have stem or roots. They have these little floaties that kind of keep them in water. Another thing that I just remembered is algae bloom. Have you guys heard about red tide?
No.
If you ever go fishing, sometimes there's a sign that says, don't eat anything that you get from here. Maybe algae bloom happened there. So algae bloom, those are the dinoflagellates because they produce toxins. If you eat anything that you have fished in this area, then it's not good. It has toxins. It doesn't always look red. This happens a lot in Southern California. So it happens a lot there. So dinoflagellates cause the red tide. There are toxins, and because there are toxins, you might see lots of organisms dying. So it can kill lots of organisms, the ones that are feeding on that water. It doesn't always look red. It can be, just normal color water here. You can see a little bit of red, but it doesn't always look red. So always maybe, try to look for the signs. If you ever go fishing, if there's a sign, even though the watercolor might not be red, there still might be some toxins there. And those toxins are produced by dinoflagellates. Then we have red algae. Red algae are red because they have red pigments, photosynthetic pigments to observe a red and blue wavelengths of light. We talked about photosynthesis, chlorophyll makes it look green, but if they have pigments that observe red color, then it's going to look red. So these are found mostly on the bottom of the ocean, red algae. Then we have green algae. Green algae is closely related to land plants. They are the ancestors of land plants. They're a diverse group. They have many similarities to land plants. They have this, chlorophyll makes them look green. If you guys watch the video, what is this called? What organism is this? You have to know the name for this one.
Volvox.
Volvox. So this is Volvox. This is multicellular organism. This was the main organism that kind of showed us the branch or the bridge between single cell organisms to multi-cell organisms. These cells, a lot of cells there, there are multiple cells. These are the reproductive structures. So chlorophyll makes it look green. Green algae are the ancestors of land plants. Green algae are closely related to brown algae. Actually, I take that back. Brown algae are closely related to diatoms. Red algae and green algae are closely related, but green algae is distantly related to brown algae. So if you were to group them together. I want you to know the name for this, Volvox. This is called Spirogyra. If you look carefully, you can see the spirals inside. I'm not gonna ask you this, but this is called Spirogyra. You don't have to know this either. Just make sure you know this one. This is called Volvox. So next group we have is water moles, slime moles, and protozoa. They're mostly heterotrophic. Anybody knows what heterotrophic means? What does heterotroph mean? We are heterotrophs.
They absorb other organisms
Absorb
for like
other
food and stuff like that.
organisms. Yes. So we've been talking about photosynthetic organisms so far. That means they're autotrophs. So we're moving on to heterotrophs next. So let me go back and try to finish drawing this. So under photosynthetic organisms, we have three more actually. We have brown algae. Can anybody tell me what organisms this includes? Brown algae? And then red algae. And green algae. So brown algae includes organisms like seaweed, kelp. Red algae looks green, red, because they have a red they can absorb red wavelength. And then the green algae are the ancestors for the land plants. Another thing about dinoflagellates, I want to say they produce toxins. They produce toxins and they can cause red tide. So that's a first group. Second group for Protista, now we have molds, the water molds and the slime molds. That's the second group we're gonna go over. Use maybe different color for this. So the only thing I want you to know about water molds is that they're decomposers and they're parasites. That's all I want you to know. If you have a fish tank and maybe your fish, maybe gets a disease, maybe a skin disease or something, it's probably coming from water molds. They are parasites of plants and animals. So that's all I need you to know about water molds. Next thing we have is slime molds. Slime molds, they can exist as single cells or large masses that behave like multicellular organism. This reminds me of that movie Transformers. You have these tiny robots and they can come together and they can make a big robot. So they can exist as single cells. So they're tiny hair spores. Then they start combining and they can become a bigger organism, multicellular organism, and it just starts to grow. If we don't have basements here, but in the places where they have basements, if they don't air it out, then this is what's gonna start growing there. It combines and it kind of walks towards the food. So this is forefront for the artificial intelligence. And the reason I say that, I want to show you a few things that are very interesting about slime molds. Let me show you. So this is slime mold. It looks like it's growing, but it's actually moving. It's looking for food. It has these algorithms. Scientists are studying those algorithms like computer. So let me see animation. So here it's gonna show that it's moving. So it actually moves and looks for food and it's very, very efficient. Here's another one. This one, so it's moving and looking for food. This is time lapse for that. So it's very efficient. Another type of experiment they do with this, they can create a maze and it can go through the maze. So it's very efficient. And I think this is really, really good model to study the algorithm. So they use it as a model and they study the algorithms using slime mold. So they're very intelligent. It can solve the mazes and stuff. So that's slime mold. I don't want you to memorize this. I think it's a little bit too much for this class. So I'm gonna try to make this part of the course as pleasant as possible. So you don't have to know the steps for this. Just know that they can exist as single cell organisms or multicellular organisms. So they're slime molds. It looks like fungus, but it's not fungus, it's Protista. Then, so this slide shows you different kinds of organisms. I'm not gonna ask you to know. I'll tell you the ones I want you to memorize, so you don't have to memorize these. So most protozoa, they are one cell. There are some that are multicellular, and they're heterotrophic, means they feed on other things, and motile. Motile means to move. In order to move, they probably have flagella. Flagella helps with movement, or cilia. So here, first group I want you to know for protozoa is ciliates. Ciliates refers to these hair-like structures. This is cilia. It helps them kind of attach to the surface and also kind of move a little bit. So ciliates is the first group. It's one-celled, heterotrophic, and motile. Because it has cilia, it can move. Motile means moving. Let me show you the difference between cilia and flagella. So here, this is cilia, it's hair-like structures. And then flagella is a tail-like structure. So that's flagella. This is cilia. We've been talking about paramecium. I want you to know paramecium, this name here. So that's paramecium. It has this cilia that helps them kind of stick and or move.
Professor, are the cilia on these organisms the same as the ones that we have like in our throat that help with things, or is that a different structure in itself?
Can you repeat that, Chris? I couldn't hear the last part.
So in our throat, don't we have like small cilia that help with like swallowing things like that?
Yeah, it helps
That's
to
the
move
same
the
as these.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's a little hair-like
Okay.
structures that we have in our throat. It's gonna help move the mucus. And people who smoke a lot, I think I talked about a little bit earlier. They go in when they wake up in the morning. They just when they smoke, they destroy the cilia. And when they wake up in the morning, they go in this coughing pit. They're going to cough and cough and cough until all the mucus comes out because they don't have the cilia to move the mucus. So yeah, we do have cilia in our throat that's gonna move the mucus.
Thank you.
Trying to look for where it would show it moving. Can't seem to find one. Let me see. This is just moving, showing more of an inside. I wanted to find it in water. Maybe it's usually swimming in water, and it finds food and just eats that. So it behaves like an animal. Here you can see it moving. So it finds food and eats it. So it behaves like an animal, but it's not an animal. So if you were in the lab, I would give you some pond water. You would make a slide out of that pond water and try to find some of these organisms on that slide. So it's very harmful that we don't have in-person labs for this part of the course because you can't really look at these in actual water. So that's paramecium, and I need you to know this name, paramecium, if you want to write it down. Behaves like an animal. It's a type of protozoa. There's a question for you guys. Which one is matched incorrectly?